Revenge is a classic motive for why villains commit villainy. My name is Brian L. Jackson. I'm the author of novels Light Warriors and Chaos, and this is the third video in my series on evil. And I want to talk today about revenge-driven characters. Now, revenge is a very specific form of a broader category of character called the ends justify the means character. But I think it is worth discussing revenge as something different. Many times revenge-driven characters, first of all, frequently they believe that what they're doing is righteous much more, in a particularly strong way, and they typically will not see the act as evil the way that an ends justify the means character might. Revenge-driven characters tend to fall into two types. There's the kind that are looking to get at somebody specific. They have a specific target or targets for their revenge. And then there's also revenge-driven characters who are angry at the world and will lash out at anyone who gets in their way. A good example of the latter, and I talked about him in my last video, but it's worth mentioning him again, is Darth Vader. Vader is an example, as well as an ends justify the means character. He is also an example, after being set on fire on Mustafar, he's also a good example of a character who is driven by revenge and is lashing out at the world. Some of the most extreme outbursts of violence on the part of Vader are the result of that feature of his personality. He is extremely angry at what's happened to him, blames everyone around him, including, by the way, his own master, Palpatine, and will lash out if provoked. Some other good examples of revenge-driven villains are, I think one could describe, obviously Magneto out of the X-Men is a good revenge-driven character. Again, second type, lashing out at the world. Much of his life is marked by tragedy. The loss of his parents in the concentration camps, loss of his wife and child, loss of many other mutant comrades, friends, people he cared about, due to other people's cruelty and violence. And he is motivated quite a bit by that desire for revenge and is lashing out at the world. Actually, Batman is a good example of a revenge-driven character, although he's not portrayed as a villain. If one is to look at him objectively, he is definitely a vigilante, and he is most definitely driven by revenge. Although Batman is more of the first type of revenge-driven character, where he's motivated more to target a specific group of people, i.e. criminals. But he's definitely a revenge-driven character. Another one who straddles the fence is a Marvel character, is Punisher. Punisher is driven again by revenge, loss of his family, and targets a specific group of people, that is, criminals. Many times you will see a mad scientist character who is also driven by revenge to do more and more extreme things, to cross certain ethical boundaries. And it is, in a sense, a revenge mentality, because the thinking behind this behavior is, I'm going to show my critics, I'm going to prove them wrong. And that is, in a sense, revenge. One of the interesting things about revenge, in terms of how characters tend to deal with it, is many of the revenge-driven characters have a tendency to conflate vengeance with justice, and you'll even hear them use the word justice when they mean revenge. One example of that is in Game of Thrones, Grey Worm. And at the last episode in Season 8, and yeah, I know that Season 8 was kind of a bomb, but it's an interesting line nevertheless. When Grey Worm is talking about Jon Snow, and he's talking about Jon Snow deserves justice, what he means is he wants to see Jon Snow executed. But what he also is saying he uses the word justice, But what he's really talking about is revenge. And it was the same mentality, by the way, towards Tyrion Lannister. Says justice, but means revenge. He wants to see the two of them killed. Tyrion for betraying his queen, and Jon Snow for killing the queen. If he truly wanted justice, he would demand a trial. And interestingly enough, that was not the demand. It was not a demand for a trial. What it was is a demand for his death. And that's not a demand for justice, that's a demand for revenge. Now, we don't get to see much of Grey Worm as being a revenge-driven character because it's so late in the series that basically you get the grumble about why, not getting to spill Jon Snow's blood or Tyrion Lannister's blood. But you don't see much about how it motivates him. But if you want to look at a really good example of a revenge-driven villain out of that series, I would posit to you that Daenerys Targaryen is actually a really good example of a revenge-driven villain, and she's presented in a way that is almost a trap to the viewer, because you are encouraged to sympathize with her motivations as the series and the storyline progresses. All the time, the writers are dropping hints to you that she's not all that she seems, that she's not as altruistic as she seems. I would posit to you that a lot of her motivation was about revenge. It was about revenge for her family being removed from power in the Seven Kingdoms, about her family being mostly slaughtered, and she was going to take back that which was rightly what she rightly deserved by her name. Not because of right of birth by itself, but because she wanted revenge on anyone and everyone who either opposed her or who dared to deny her right to the throne or helped take away her family's power. And obviously also those who were involved in the deaths of her family. But I would suggest she was a pretty powerful, revenge-driven character. And she was definitely motivated. She definitely had a strong attitude of the ends justify the means. But the difference between her and some other characters I can think of with that same mentality is she really did believe what she was doing was right. She was sorely mistaken on that point, but she really honestly believed that. It was right to crucify the masters. It was right to burn her adversaries alive with dragonfire. It was right to burn down King's Landing after the defenses, after Cersei's soldiers killed her dragon. She's a good example of that. And what makes these characters really interesting is if they're written well and you get a good view inside their head, many times their motivations are quite sympathetic. And one might find himself reading this and thinking, yeah, I could see myself doing that, until that character crosses a certain threshold, at which point in time you're like, whoa, how do we get here? The unfortunate thing with Daenerys Targaryen was, I think that as they got to the end of the series, and we'll have to wait and see what George R.R. Martin does in the books, but at least in the television series, the weakness is that I think that they tried to condense what was long seasons down into many fewer episodes. So what you were looking at is a very rapid alignment shift, or what it felt like a rapid alignment shift with Daenerys Targaryen, going from someone who had what would look like ostensibly altruistic motives to suddenly being willing to slaughter the masses because she was angry. And that's exactly why she did it. She was angry. One last example from Game of Thrones of a revenge-driven character who was definitely a villain is Cersei Lannister. Cersei Lannister committed a number of atrocities based on revenge alone. Now, I think she could also be seen as a moral nihilist at times and as an ends justify the means character at times. But I think where she's most interesting, is really when she's driven by revenge. Revenge for the deaths of her children, revenge for the death of her father. I mean, she blew up a good chunk of King's Landing just because she didn't like what the Tyrells were doing with her son, and that they had caused her to be locked up and tortured by the High Sparrow and his minions. And that was revenge. It was nothing else but revenge. Was doing that, and the fact that it killed a bunch of innocents who had nothing to do with what she was pissed about really didn't bother her in the slightest. She didn't give a shit. So that's revenge-driven characters. As I said, I felt like it needed a separate discussion from Ends Justify the Means. I think there's some distinctions, and that's why I wanted to do a separate video. If you like this video, if you find this an interesting topic, please feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. And if you are interested in what I have to say, you might also check out my novels, Light Warriors and Chaos, which are currently available on Amazon. Audiobooks will be out before the end of the year. All things going off without a hitch. Hope to hear from you guys. Thanks.